All right, let's dive into a really fascinating and honestly a kind of weird idea, the danger that can come from gaining insight. I know, it sounds totally backward, right? But there was this incredibly wise teacher who warned that the very knowledge we're all chasing can actually become our biggest trap. So how on earth could that be true? Let's unpack.
You know, we're always taught that insight is the goal. It's the big prize at the end of the road. But what if that's not the whole picture? What if the exact moment we grab onto an insight, we actually risk losing our way completely? That's the big question we're going to dig into today.
So the teacher who gave us this incredible warning was Upāsikā Kee, a really famous Thai Buddhist meditation master. And this one quote, wow, it just cuts right to the heart of everything. It's telling us that the act of claiming knowledge, creating a self that knows, is the very thing that makes that knowledge go back.
To really get what she's talking about, there's this simple but brilliant analogy that helps a lot. We're going to call it salting yesterday's soup. It makes this super deep concept feel really, really simple.
Okay, so imagine this. Yesterday, you made the perfect soup. You tasted it, realized it needed just a pinch of salt, you added it, and boom, delicious. Now, today you're making a brand new pot of soup. If you just automatically throw salt in there without even tasting it, just because it worked yesterday, well, you could totally ruin it, right? That is exactly her point. Applying a past truth to a totally new, fresh moment without checking in again can just spoil the whole thing. So let's just break this flawed process down. First, you have a real insight. Yesterday's soup needed salt. That was true. Then a completely new moment happens. Today's soup. The big mistake, happens in step 3. You blindly apply that old knowledge. You're acting on a memory instead of what's right in front of you. You're basically tasting a memory, not the actual soup.
And this is exactly why that whole process falls apart. Upāsikā Kee taught that knowledge isn't some static trophy you win and put on a shelf. Nope, it's alive. It's fluid. An insight that was totally correct a minute ago can become false in the very next moment because reality itself is always changing. Holding on to it is kind of like trying to freeze a running river. It just doesn't work.
But look, the danger here goes way deeper than just messing up a bowl of soup. This habit of clinging to old knowledge actually worms its way into the very structure of our ego, and that's what Upāsikā Kee called the deceits of knowing.
So this is the key. The problem isn't the insight itself. Seeing that the soup needs salt is a good thing. The problem is the sense of I that grabs onto it. The second we think, aha, I've figured this out, or I know better than everyone else, that insight suddenly becomes a tool for the ego. It just fuels pride and this feeling of being separate from others.
And here's exactly where that shift happens. Right knowledge is just a pure, clear perception. You're just seeing the soup for what it is. But it flips into wrong view the second we add that little story, I know. That tiny addition, that act of claiming ownership, it just contaminates the whole thing with self-deception.
And Upāsikā Kee does not mince words about how serious this is. She flat out warns that even a little bit of pride or conceit will destroy everything. It completely torpedoes the entire point of the practice. It turns a tool that was meant for freedom into another chain for the ego. It's a heavy warning, for sure.
This all leads us to the real philosophical heart of her warning. To truly get the danger here, we have to look at the very nature of what we even call knowledge.
Okay, so the key term here is a word from the Pali language, sankhara, and it basically translates to fabrication. The teaching here is that everything we experience in our minds, our thoughts, our feelings, even our most brilliant insights, are all fabrications. They aren't solid, objective realities. They're things the mind constructs. So think of them less like a photograph of reality and more like a painting that the mind creates.
So what does that actually mean for our insights? Well, first, it means even the most correct insight is still a fabrication, a mental construction. This makes insights useful tools, kind of like a hammer is useful for building a house. But the hammer isn't the house itself, right? They're not the final goal. And because they're just constructions, they're always changing and wavering. Trying to cling to something that's always shifting is, well, stressful. The real job, then, is to see that there's no solid, permanent self in any of these fabrications, including our own amazing ideas.
And here is a very specific trap. Someone might have a moment of really deep peace in meditation and immediately label it, this is it, this is emptiness, I've arrived. But Upāsikā Kee would call this imitation emptiness. The moment you slap a label on it and think you're done, you stop looking. Your whole journey of discovery just grinds to a halt, stuck on one partial truth.
Okay, so if knowing is so dangerous, what are we supposed to do? Just be ignorant? No. This is where the teaching gets incredibly practical and honestly, really beautiful.
So let's look at the solution, the art of letting go.
Her solution isn't to stop knowing things. It's to completely change our relationship with knowing. And she framed it as this elegant active process, knowing and letting go of knowing. It's not about becoming dumb. It's about having a dynamic, unattached kind of awareness.
The practice itself is a really clear two-step dance. Step 1 is to know. See things as clearly as you possibly can, with total mindfulness right as they're happening. But then, and this is the absolute key, comes step 2. You immediately let go. You release that knowing before it has a chance to harden, before the I can swoop in and say, that's mine. You see it, and then you just drop it.
And this final thought just wraps the whole thing up perfectly. It's this continuous flow of knowing and then releasing, from one moment to the next. The goal isn't to fill your mind with a bunch of brilliant insights you can show off. The goal is to have a mind that is empty, open, and totally free. A mind that can see reality fresh in every single instant, without the old dusty filter of yesterday's knowledge. And it really leaves us with a question, doesn't it? What truths are we holding on to so tightly that might be stopping us from seeing what's right in front of us today?